Hello, and welcome to another episode of How the Hell Did I Get Here with Meg and Rachel. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to our honored guest today, Dr. Jeri Kurtz. Hi, Jeri. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Good. A little bit about Dr. Jeri before we move on. She finished her career as the Director of Budget and Institutional Research at South Dakota State University. Born and raised in Sacramento, California, she moved to a farm in rural South Dakota after marrying her sweetheart, now familiarly known as her crazy husband of 52 years. She has degrees in home economics, mathematics, and education administration with a finance emphasis. She now focuses on supporting her four amazing children. Dr. Rachel M.K. Headley happens to be her favorite.
That's according
This
to me.
is Rachel's opinion.
I wrote it. So
Yeah. Her 9 adorable and brilliant grandkids and the fine and fiber arts communities. Holy buckets. We were talking actually before we got on here, and I told Jeri she's a badass, and she said, well, I don't know if that's true, but I still think that it is true.
She hasn't talked us out of it anyway.
Yes. So for our listeners, Rachel and I decided for the month of May, which is Mother's Day month, that we would interview our mothers because after all, we are who we are because of our mothers.
That is true.
For better or worse.
Mostly better.
Yes. So Jeri, tell us a little bit about your story and kind of your how the hell moment where you looked up and thought, how the hell did I get here?
Oh, that's good. I'm 72 years old, so I think I have to go way back and say that I was raised in a very traditional time. I'm also adopted. I think that probably played into my upbringing, but at the time, I would have said probably not, but I just felt ordinary. But I was raised in a very traditional home. My dad worked, my mother was a housewife, and the expectations at that time of girls was that we're going to get married and have children. And if you did work, you were a teacher or a nurse or a secretary of some kind. And I knew right up front I didn't want to be a nurse. That never was in my
so that's where I get that.
Yeah. But I did have some issues, I guess, growing up because my mother had a nervous breakdown when I was about 13. And as I mentioned, my dad was pretty traditional, so he didn't have much influence on us growing up in terms of, helping and stuff. So from 13 on, I was kind of on my own. And fortunately, I was what they would have said was a good kid in those days. And I was always very aware of the consequences of things before I did them. And so I just didn't do them if it looked like it was going to get me in trouble. So that's how I grew up. Having said that, early on, I had a lot of interests. I was interested in art and all kinds of art. My dad actually liked to draw and did sculpturing and things like that, although he thought that was kind of he didn't value that. And I also was very mechanical. But of course, girls didn't do that either. When I went to college, my folks did emphasize going to college. And, when you're thinking about what you want to do with your life, and I'd already met my husband to be, and I did not have any domestic skills. So I decided to try something in the home economics area. And I took some classes just so I would know how to cook and sew, the basic stuff. And then liked it so well that took more. That isn't how I really saw myself, but it just seemed like I fell into that. And my husband was from South Dakota. So we got married and we moved to South Dakota.
Surprise, that's a change.
in those days, women kind of followed the husbands, and I didn't think it was a negative thing. I was actually excited about it and thought it was going to be a grand adventure. And so it started. And I don't think it stopped after that. I transferred to South Dakota State University, and they actually had a home economics degree with teaching. So that's what I got. And I actually took took a job teaching home economics in the early 70s. And my husband graduated and he decided he wanted to farm. So we farmed for about 12 years, and I had never lived on a farm, but I was always one that felt I could do anything I set my mind to. So I did pig chores. Cliff wouldn't let me on a tractor, but
Probably for the best.
yeah, I didn't mind that too much. I, took care of kids. We had 4 children. And I did the hog chores while he was out in the field and, did whatever I needed to do. Had a big garden, canned, whatever. And so that went on for a number of years. And then Cliff got into, he got in a farm accident, so to speak, and hurt his back. And we ended up deciding the farm economy was not going well at that time. Interest rates were quite high. And so we decided we were going to get out while we could. And we had a farm sale, decided that we were going to move back to California to be closer to my family for a while. And so that's what we did. We left South Dakota with a little money in the bank and a U-Haul trailer.
A tow behind.
A tow behind, yes. And no jobs lined up.
4 kids.
So, 4 kids all in school.
Kindergarten through 6th grade, I think, is what we
Yeah, something to that effect. And we, some of the folks back in South Dakota thought we were just crazy, which we kind of were.
You must have really wanted to get out of farming. It's so bad. We're going to do crazy stuff.
Cliff has always been one of these that, he kind of weighed all his options and then just did what he thought was the best and never looked back. That's kind of what happened. And so we went to California, and he did have a degree in agriculture. So he ended up getting a job with what was then called Farmers Home Administration in California.
Is that I got service agency now, I think?
Something like that. I'm not even sure I know, because we're not interested in that anymore. But we came to California, stayed with my sister for a while. And then
God bless her.
Yes. I got a job working for a paving contractor who thought I was an economics major.
I love that story.
Yeah. And so that was for about a year. And then I taught math on an emergency credential in another town. Cliff was transferred all over the place at the time. He was a trainee, and then they wanted him here and there. And after 3 years in California, and there was a drive-by shooting at the local high school when our son was in 9th grade, and we just decided that was it for California. And so Farmers Home moved us, but Cliff had to stay with them for a year after we moved. And so we did that, stayed in Parkston.
That's in South Dakota.
Yeah. South Dakota for a couple of months. And then I moved in with Cliff's sister in Brookings for a couple of months with all the 4 kids. And that was pretty crazy also.
You guys have some really gracious sisters.
Yes, we really do.
Good support.
We didn't stay with them long, I have to say, but we did make that work. And So at that point, I have to say, we were sort of in an unknown, it was kind of, what do we do now kind of thinking, because neither of us had a job. Well, Cliff had a job, but after the year with Farmers Home, he quit Farmers Home because he could not get any closer to Brookings than Parkston, which is
2 hours.
2 hours away. And so we wanted to be in the Brookings area. That's where our family was and our support and all of that. And so we just said the heck with it. And we rented a house in Brookings and figured we'd do something. And so at that point, Cliff tried selling insurance. He sold cars for 3 years. We had a store that we opened and closed within about a year's time. And, and then he got into building fences, like farm fences. And then that kind of graduated into fences for houses. And he finally started building houses. And I went into substitute teaching, which I wasn't excited about, but I couldn't teach in South Dakota without getting a certificate, which home ec was not a thing then. And so I went back to school and got my math courses under my belt and got a master's in math education, thinking I would teach high school math. But of course, they didn't have any openings.
Yeah, because there's like 2 math teachers who are going to be here till they die.
Yeah,
pretty much.
And Brookings was hard to get into, and I really didn't want to commute. We'd done that in California, and I wasn't excited about doing it here, especially in the winter. So I started looking at other jobs, and I got a budget analyst position at SDSU then. That was in 1991. I was in my early 40s at that time. And so, wow. In the next 10 years, Cliff started building more houses, and we moved into a different house about every other year, if not every year. And I worked. That was steady work. I loved it. I thought, for once in my life, I still remember at my interview, they said, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And my brain was saying, oh, I hope here doing the same thing. But I never held a job for not because I quit, but we kept moving or something happened. And I hadn't held a job for more than 2 years at a time. And so I was I didn't say that, of course, at the interview, but that was going through my head. And I was able to stay there, but other people kept leaving. So I just kept getting promoted.
I'm sure it had nothing to do with your skills or ability. Other people just left.
But I did, as you work at a place, as you gals have been saying, you get used to what's happening and you understand the processes and, all of that. And the knowledge is, gained, and you get better and better at what you're doing. So I would have to say that I was not looking for any leadership opportunities, but I think having run a store and having been a teacher in a classroom where you were in charge, there is something there that sort of lends itself to leading if a person chooses to go that route. But it really was not my choice. I really would have preferred being in the back room with a spreadsheet. And I will have to say that I also had to learn all there was about a computer. I was in the workforce before computers came along. And so that was all new technology. And we even had the big computer that was hooked up to the state system. And I still remember being terrified that something I was going to do on that machine was going to sabotage the whole system, and I was going to be responsible. But of course, that was just, one of those things. You didn't know how everything worked, but I figured it out. And I think that's part of my math skills, I guess, that came to the front. And I really enjoyed that job, even though it was very stressful. And after 10 years, I was senior budget analyst. And then at that point, I got my doctorate. And my boss, who was the vice president, let me go get my doctorate on company time even. And they had a special program. And I really enjoyed going back to school, but I took, higher ed administration, and it was so relevant to what I was doing that I really loved it. And so I did get a doctorate in that, and I got a hefty raise at that point. So that helped quite a bit too. And I guess I just kept going. In the meantime, at home, grandkids were being born, kids were graduating from college, and, all the other stuff that goes with having a home life. Husband building houses and all this kind of crazy stuff. And the same year that that I got my doctorate, our first grandson was born. And we also moved into our log home, which we have now been in 20 years. So that was the first permanent home we actually had, I think. But then I became director of budget and institutional research. And that was about as high as I could get in my office at the time. And I really enjoyed that, although at that point, I was more of an administrator than actually doing the work, and I really enjoyed the work. So not that that was a bad thing or anything like that, but when you get into administration, it does change things a little bit. You have to deal with all the problems that come up instead of the day-to-day.
That's spoken like a true stabilizer, Mom.
Yeah.
I'd rather just do the work. Don't get me in the middle of all these problems.
I know. Also,
And,
the aha moment of, oh God, I hope I get to stay in this job for a while.
I know. 5 years from now, I want to be sitting in the same chair that I am today.
This work exactly.
Yeah, and the funny thing was about, I don't know, I guess the whole thing was kind of a different thing for me. But when you talk about aha moments and how the hell did this happen, the one time in my life where I actually thought that was not related to my job at all, but when I was pregnant with our third child, and I was in some store, I don't even remember where, and I had one toddler on one hand and about a 4-year-old on the other. And I thought, what in the heck am I gonna do with one more? I only got hands and they're full. And I remember that. So when you gals asked if I wanted to do this, that came to mind. Otherwise, the change just happened. And I will say that my life has been one of change. From the time I was quite young, it was very stable when I was real young. But then my mother having become ill, and that kind of sent our lives topsy-turvy. And she was in and out of psychiatric wards the rest of her life. And so it wasn't just a one-time thing. She was on tranquilizers and all kinds of awful medications that, nowadays you would just be horrified to learn about. And so my whole life has been one of change, and somehow I've adapted. And but I also don't look back. I'm a real optimist, I guess. And I've always felt that, or positive thinker, I don't know how you want to put it, but I look at the past and I think, okay, it's there, but I truly believe that the past is over. You learn from it and move on. We don't always have control of our lives. I think you can to a certain extent, but things happen and you have to deal with it, and then you move on, and you don't dwell on what happened. You move ahead, look to the future. And that's how I've always been. And it's served me well, I guess. And
well, it also, from a kid's perspective, it serves the kids too, because we never felt like shamed or fault, or like there was never any kind of emotional baggage or thrown back in your face, or what I mean? Like it was always a positive.
No disappointment talks.
No. Oh, there was some of that.
Shaming,
disappointed. We're disappointed in you, talks. Not a lot for me. I was like, Mom, I kind of knew the consequences and I didn't want them. So I was a pretty good kid. But really, I think that has served probably the family more than we expect, because there is never any wallowing or woe is me talk. Never. I don't remember one thing about once ever having a woe is us. We're just, it was nothing we can do. It's, we're in a bad shape and we're trapped here by other means. Like it was always, we're in charge of where we're.
Yes.
And I think I've always felt that I could do anything that I set my mind to. I've never felt that, even though I came up in a very traditional home, I never felt like as a woman, I couldn't do whatever I tried to do. If I wanted to do it, I don't want to be a doctor, so I'm not going there, or a nurse. But, if I wanted to change the oil in my car, now Cliff usually does it. I don't even get to touch the darn stuff. But if I wanted to, I could figure it out, because I could look on the internet and it would show me exactly how to do it. Yeah. So I've never felt that I wasn't capable. And so therefore, I've always felt like, I had charge of myself, and I could, if I didn't like, what's going on today, then I'll change it and do something different tomorrow. And I don't know. I don't know where that attitude came from, because I'm not, I wasn't taught it. I don't know that it's something that you teach. And my sister, she's adopted also, did not have that same philosophy, I don't think. But anyway, so everybody's different, but that's how I have come up through my life. And I think it served me well. But I will say that I think Cliff has been the driving force in change in our lives. I think he's one that, if things weren't going the way he expected, he just did something else. And maybe that's part of where the can-do attitude came from. I don't know, but certainly it's been an interesting ride.
Well, I think so Jeri is a stabilizer, but we are picking up some pretty obvious, I would say, organizer tendencies. And so maybe for as much as you appreciate Cliff kind of encouraging you to be change adaptable, he probably also appreciates that you kept the shit together while everything was swirling around you. So
that's right. That is a superpower.
Yes.
That is a superpower.
And I will say thank you from those of us who have to deal with Rachel on a daily basis, because even though she's annoyingly optimistic, anything that we cannot do in our business anyways, and that her attitude about that has a lot to do with our perspective on it. So Jeri, thank you so much for your time today. What a wonderful treat for us to get to hear your story. Rachel has shared many pieces of that, but there's some that I can't wait to ask you about later. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us. To the rest of you listening, join us on the next episode. Until then, lead powerfully.
Change the world.